Welcome to You Heard It From Us, the podcast where adventure meets advice. I'm DNDWife, your artistic storyteller and dedicated miniature painter.
And I'm Dungeon Master Eguile, your seasoned storyteller with a flair for epic tales and a passion for bringing our worlds to life. Together, we are a couple of nerds.
Whether you're navigating the depths of the dungeon or the dynamics of your gaming table, we're here to explore the vibrant world of tabletop role-playing games with you.
Each episode, we dive into topics that every gamer can relate to, like, is there really such thing as too many dice?
Or how to keep the peace when your co-adventurer is also your co-pilot in life.
We share our own trials, triumphs, and tales from the enchanting world of Extraeus and beyond, all while connecting with you, our amazing TTRPG community.
From community polls to social media shoutouts, we want you to be part of our adventure. So grab your favorite set of dice
and join us as we embark on a quest to make your tabletop gaming experience more fun and meaningful.
This is You Heard It From Us,
where every episode is an adventure. Welcome back, adventurers. You're tuning in to You Heard It From Us, the podcast where we dive into all things tabletop and TTRPG. I'm DM Eguile, and as always, I'm here with the amazing DNDWife.
Hey everyone, so glad to have you with us for another episode. Today we're tackling a question every table faces sooner or later. How do you settle table disputes?
Yep. Whether it's about loot distribution, in-game rivalries, or even rule disagreements, table disputes are bound to come up. So tonight, we'll be sharing our own stories, strategies for keeping things running smoothly. Because, hey, no one wants a small disagreement to derail an entire campaign, right?
Absolutely. We'll also be breaking down your responses to our community poll, where we ask how you handle disputes at the table. From group discussions to solo decisions, we'll cover it all with some laughs and lessons along the way.
All right, let's dive in. And don't forget, if you enjoy this show, please leave us a like, a review, and join our conversation on Discord. We love hearing your stories and your feedback.
Let's settle those disputes, adventurers. Here we go.
So obviously, you know, D&D, tabletop, I mean, heck, anytime you get a group of people together, you're gonna have conflict.
A little bit, right.
And we have not been, you know...
Immune to that
in the slightest. And I feel like, especially in the early days.
Oh, yeah. Well, when everyone starts, obviously, nobody really knows what they're doing, so... I think the disputes can happen a little more just because everyone's sort of on edge.
Right, and I think a lot of it came to, it's like everyone, you have so many people coming together with different expectations of what to come. So it's always going to be impossible, I mean, in the limited amount of time we have, to make sure everyone is always happy. And especially the more players you have, you know, we have 6.
Right, it's really tough.
So it is that thing where it's like, you know, it's always going to be something. And rather than kind of playing the land of make-believe, even though we love make-believe, the idea of like, oh, well, we don't have these problems. Right. Oh, we'll never have a dispute. No, you will have. Always. And if you don't have disputes, they are just not in front of you.
Yeah.
You know, so it is those things where I think everyone has like a lot of their own personal experiences when it comes to this. And we get a little unique kind of view on it, given that we're a DM player kind of combo.
Right. We kind of cover both sides of the coin. And it's really interesting to see how we deal with that conflict at the table as the DM versus as a player. So I'm interested to find out what the different perspectives are.
Right. And so, like, you know, I mean, a real early example, you know, for me personally, you know, we started a long time ago. I mean, we're almost on like 7th, 8th year in terms of being involved with D&D. And we started, when we started this big, large campaign, we were doing the Curse of Strahd.
Yep. Oh, so much fun.
If anyone's played the Curse of Strahd by Wizards of the Coast, they know that it's, you know, very dark, and it's very much a campaign set up for the players to feel very weak, very hopeless in the beginning of the campaign.
Yep.
It's meant to be that way.
Yeah.
Well, I had an issue where I have a player who obviously feels that that's not okay, and that, oh, you know, well, we should be getting items, we should be getting loot, and was getting a little bit of the kind of what I always refer to as little loot envy.
Yeah.
You know, and it can be anything. Someone gets a wooden stick and they're like, oh, well, I want a wooden stick.
Yeah, where's mine?
You know, and so they kind of had expressed to me kind of this displeasure for, okay, well, it feels like other people are getting more things and I'm not getting anything, and it, you know, and I don't feel like I'm a part of this, and it's like, okay. Now, for context, and if any of you guys have been out there and played or ran Curse of Strahd, this character was a paladin.
Oh, yeah.
So it's one of those situations where it's like, yeah, no, you're meant to, because that's literally the story has been designed for like the cleric and paladin characters to really be at a 1 down.
Yeah, because they're in this dark place. There's no
undead,
sunshine. There's
evil.
no happiness.
Right, the game's supposed to make these kind of characters feel, but as the story progresses, these are probably become the most powerful characters in the campaign, given a couple of the items,
the most effective,
that are designed specifically for those classes. And so, I had to sit down with him because it was getting to a point where you could see it kind of being reflecting in his work or in his play, where it's like, I don't want to engage, I don't want to do anything. So I kind of had to sit down and really work on this idea of the DM trust, right? Where it was like, hey, trust me, this will eventually get better. Like, just go with it.
Right.
Like, obviously,
I get that it starts off slow.
Right. It's that idea of like, I'm not here to be the bad guy. I'm not trying to make you lose. But it is that thing where it's like, hey, just go with it. Let the story go. Don't concern yourself necessarily with these, trinkets.
How many items you have.
But be in the story. Obviously, you're a paladin, you have magic, there's other things you can do. And so that really was kind of like that first idea where it was like, okay, I could very much have just been like, all right, you know what, deal with it. That's just what happens. Get good, son, or basically make it to where that character or that player could feel like, okay, well, they're not doing enough. So then it's like, oh, well, unless you role play perfectly, you don't get items. But it was more of like a really adjusting this idea of like, look, trust me as the DM,
I'll get you there.
And really be this idea of, I'm here to be transparent because obviously I'm running a campaign in a book, so it's not necessarily me deciding these things.
Right.
And we all know that the dice can be fickle sometimes and just maybe not in your favor.
You don't always get what you want, you could roll as much as you want and still come up all ones.
Yeah, but I feel like that was at least the beginning of like my understanding, because it was really the first time I ever, as a DM, was like, oh, am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
Is this the incorrect way? When in my early times I was just following these books, and so when you're following those books, it's not like I'm the one deciding when loot comes down. And so when it's like, okay, well, maybe I'm reading a book wrong, but discussing with the player got me out of my own head, because I kind of learned exactly what their issue was, and then I was able to settle that dispute, because I feel like if I let it go any longer, it probably was going to become something much worse.
Yeah. Well, it could have gotten out of hand, and then it could have resulted in maybe some like in-game confrontations. Yeah. So
in the DM, it's always tough because we are kind of that arbiter, and so I don't ever want to feel like it's like, well, it's my rules. I always say it as a joke.
I am God.
DMs say it as a joke, but we never want to make the idea that like, oh yeah, we want to force our players into having no fun, or we want them to be,
I want them to be miserable.
We want them to lose and stuff like that, when it could be nothing more than the opposite.
Yeah, well, it's like, is it really all that fun to you? Like, I get for some people it's fun to torture their players, but I think for the most part, DMs just want to have fun alongside their friends.
Oh, DMs just want to have fun. But it is one of those things where I think also as a DM, I deal with disputes in one way, but then you as a player, you have a whole other different level, because I don't have the emotional connection, I think, as much, because I'm not I'm all the bad guys. They're supposed to not like me. And
even the NPCs, right? If someone messes with your NPCs, well, they're just background characters, so really it's like, okay, well, yeah, they're fodder, right? Like, they're meant to be sort of on the chopping block if necessary.
Yeah, but you've had a few.
But I've, as a player, my characters are almost sacred to me. I love them so much, and I put a lot of effort into not just creating them, but like embodying them within the game, within the campaigns we do, and so. There's been a couple of times where player confrontation has posed an issue. So during actually that same campaign in Curse of Strahd,
early days,
I had a fellow friend, Milo, who was playing a rogue with some sticky fingers, and it was all fine when he was stealing from everyone else we encountered, but then he started trying to steal from his own party members, and a typical rogue, right? And that's all fine and dandy, because you're playing into who who you picked and what you're meant to be and stuff like that. I totally get that, but you cannot expect us to just allow it to happen without having our issues ourselves. Like, for example, my character Alira was particularly attached to her money and her valuables, so She did not appreciate theft of any kind because she herself is sometimes sticky fingered. So why would she want anybody else
It's like the rogues,
to take from her?
The rogues are always the most picky about them getting robbed themselves.
I was my character was a bard, so she's like half in, half out of that world anyway. And so she was already kind of like, don't touch my stuff. And they did. And so it created a conflict where we had to kind of pause the game because it started getting a little too heated between him and myself. And you had to kind of step in a little.
Yeah, I even remember that was one of those times where it was, I believe you were like asking me of like, oh, can he do, it was like the
can he really do this?
Out of that game where it was like, or, I remember it was you turned to this player and you were just like, why are you doing this?
Right,
why
are you seriously going through with this?
Yeah, and it really did kind of get that kind of pause of like, whoa, okay. And, it's like that moment where you
because I had an accent and I dropped it. I was like, excuse me, is this really happening right now?
Right. And I think that was also just shows, like you were saying, just how invested you were. And and really it was one of those things where you get so lost in how good a fellow player might be role playing that you're like, oh, I can do anything to their character. They're not going to mind. And obviously not so much.
Excuse you, no way.
Yeah.
No, I love Alira. I still do, even though she's like 2 campaigns ago. So it was a really interesting, unique situation to find ourselves in, and it led to some interesting rulings because you got involved and so did the rest of the table, and we kind of all had to discuss it and suss it out because ultimately it didn't just involve me and the player, it involved what he could do to the rest of the table too and the rest of the party. So everybody kind of had to pitch in and give their own, and so it resulted in sort of being like, okay, well, you know what? You're a rogue. We can't really stop you from stealing. That is part of what you're supposed to do and what you're meant to be. But there's also consequences to that. So if you decide to steal from a player can decide to attack you in retaliation of theft. And so he learned real quick that the consequences would follow through, and the thievery lessened to quite a bit of a degree after that. It was really nice.
And I even think it made for better kind of role playing and story moments even later on because there was a better understanding as we went further on in the story, which really kind of made it nice and obviously allowed for not only for the issue to be settled, but it also helped prevent, I think, future issues from coming up.
Yeah. And much later, those 2 characters ended up being like brother and sister towards the end of the campaign. It was so lovely to see them grow and grow closer.
Gotcha. So, as always, we like to always touch with our small group out there of the Couple of Nerds community.
Yep, on Discord.
Yeah, on Discord and on YouTube. We always throwing out polls from time to time. So what was this tonight's poll all about?
Well, in keeping with the theme, of course, it's how do you settle table disputes? And we provided a couple of options. The first was the player vote. Do you just put it up to the table?
Democracy.
DM vote only. The DM is God.
Dictatorship.
And a group vote, which includes both the DM and the players.
Modified Republic.
And whatever cats or animals might be present as well,
All right, yeah. What was the results?
It was a resounding landslide win for the group vote.
I kind of figured that was what as we were talking, it's so kind of synonymous, and I also think it harkens back to just obviously our education. Whenever we were in group activities in grade school, college, even at work, right? You're always taught to kind of settle the disputes as a group.
Right. Everyone should get a say, and then we kind of all figure it out.
Right. Because it really is it's because obviously we're in a communication type thing. It's all about talking and being there. And the other thing is you have the fantasy emotions on top of that, right? We have other characters with different unique motives that might not even be what we could have in the real world. Especially in campaigns where, say, fellow players are evil alignment, right? So it's tough. And so you have to really be open to discussion amongst everyone. And it's really nice to show that the community also looks as the DM as part of this.
It isn't one or the other. The players get all the say or the DM gets all the say. Really, they wanted it to be up to everyone.
Yeah, I think sometimes there's a lot of the differences where it's like, okay, is the table the players? Is the table the DMs?
Yeah.
When in reality, it's both, right?
course.
It's a group thing. It's as I always stress through, and if you've listened to us for some time, I always stress for the idea of, the DM's a fellow player. It's not someone who's necessarily against
just a different role in the game,
right?
That's all.
And make sure that the game runs and all that. So the idea that they kind of should be included in discussions and things like that, it's always going to be kind of the best way to have great story, great gameplay, and great fun.
And as an added bonus, the DM brings this sort of impartialness to the table because they aren't a character in the party, so they don't have a bias towards any sort of personal motives per se. They're, the DM is a representative of the game as a whole, not just a single person or entity.
Yeah, and I mean, as always, we look at a microcosm of things, and there's always going to be outliers on both, whether it's a rebellious table of players or it's a dictator like DM.
Right.
I mean, we see all through
always outliers.
Reddit and like crit crad stories.
The horror stories.
Of DMs and players alike.
Yeah.
And it goes a lot from not having that open discussion. And I also think what is the goal for, like, as our community says with the player discussions is that, or the group being a full group, is that it makes it easier for people to see kind of exactly where everyone's at.
Yeah.
I think sometimes when it comes to like player discussions, it could be nice, but you kind of exclude some of the other players to also make certain decisions about that character's play.
Yeah.
If two players settle something amongst themselves, that's great, right?
Awesome.
But if they go outside the table, it could be an issue that more than one player has. And so, yes, you found out that, player A doesn't
on one
like
side
how
it's resolved.
you solved, but then it looks like all you did now was partner with one other player, and all the other players now look like
they feel excluded.
Exactly. And so I think that really is kind of the nice push of like, it kind of is important to have everyone. And as much as I love, being a DM, you try to be a mediator in a sense like that. But
you're like
really,
the ref.
Yeah, but really it's always obviously impossible to be impartial.
True.
And so for me, I think there are a few different ways to look at it, and I think it just depends on the type of dispute. And that's kind of my biggest look at it as a DM, is that there's different types of disputes.
That's true.
There are what I would consider the more frivolous, they're more based around the mechanics of the game, right? Like you said, can he steal from me? Can this person do this?
Yeah.
Are they're being a bother to me in game? That's always going to be something that needs to be solved openly.
Yes.
But I feel sometimes there are issues that can come up that the DM has to be kind of the only person to make a decision. Because like you said, being a mediator, it also is also being the arbitrator. Because a lot of times, players' disputes can be not necessarily player on player. When the dispute is player on an NPC or player against the rules in general, a lot of times that puts the DM himself or herself in that specific role of judge, jury, and executioner. Because it is, and a lot of times, we don't like to imagine these things happening or even want to even assume, but things like cheating, inappropriate play, disrespectful play,
breaking of the rules.
There's not only that, but what a lot of times is, property damage of the DM's home. 9 times out of 10, the dungeon master is also the host. So that puts another level of kind of reality too on the game, right? So as much as we want to like rule for who gets the mirror of reflection +3, but also who pays for the damage for the broken wall because someone got a little too excited and smashed into the wall. Or done something, that wasn't necessarily the smartest thing to do and caused someone to get hurt outside of the game. Right? So that's always something where I believe there is moments where the DM has to kind of step down and go, okay, you know what? You and I got to talk. This is the rules. No one else is going to really need to know about this because this has already crossed the line that there not even need to be a discussion. So like it really is funny because a lot of our early issues came from our early campaigns. And so in the Curse of Strahd, I had 2 players that kind of were like that kind of did a lot of their, they had a way they wanted to play and it was the only way they wanted to play.
Yeah, it was their way or the highway.
I had a character who, in order to create his name, just kind of slammed his head on his keyboard and put 80,000 characters down and expected everyone to pronounce this name. And it's like, okay, that's not really how that works.
Yeah.
You know, as much as it's okay for like a name generator, but you're not going to impose all this on other players. So I ended up just deleting his name to like 6 characters that was in the name and shortening the name.
Yeah.
You know, so it is those times where it was like, you know, am I going to have everyone come together roundhouse and vote on the, no, because that's a tough one because, you know, but am I just going to go ahead and say, all right, let me just cut the name. Here's what you got. Go with it. That's going to make a lot less problem. And sometimes DMs kind of have to understand they have to make that call. And I was really reluctant. And I think I let things go longer and it actually caused more disputes kind of trickling down because of that lack. And the biggest part of that is that, you know, that character in another, I end up having to do what I believe DMs hate having to do, which is remove people from the table, you know, but it was very much these two kind of had, it was their table and everyone else was playing it.
Yeah. And it wasn't just like one thing in particular that they did. It was an accumulation of things that happened that eventually led to the removal.
And so what ended up being was, you know, obviously we get close to the end of the Curse of Strahd, and then they ended up basically saying, you know, unilaterally themselves, hey, we're not going to be here for 6 weeks. We're just going to be gone. We have other things to take care of. I believe it was a TV show. But, you know, and that was more important to them to watch than play the game with their 3 other friends that we have been for, at this point, almost over a year doing the Curse of Strahd, and we're at the end.
Yeah, with the finale.
The home stretch. And so it ended up being, to me, where I had to finally just be like, you know what? I've had enough. There's no reason that these 3 other people who are putting all this work and effort in. Now, you guys were being, you know, totally like, hey, you know, it's okay. We'll wait for them. You know,
we can wait another week.
You know, people were trying to be hospitable, but it was obvious that it was that idea of, you know, players don't want to obviously hurt other players or knock them out of the game. So as a DM, you got to make that decision. So I ended up having to be like, you know what? This isn't working for us. We're going to need to remove them. I ended up operating them as NPCs for the rest of the rest of like the couple of sessions. And it was that thing where I think I remember we ended where, you know, everyone was like, oh, you know, these 2 characters were the best they ever were.
And they weren't even here.
Yeah. And it really just kind of shows where, you know, the party was willing to, you know, make these concessions, deal with this worst gameplay because they really didn't want to have a dispute. They didn't want to start anything. So sometimes as the DM, you have to be the one to start the dispute and basically solve the problem yourself. Yeah,
it was tough, you know, as a player. I think it particularly is not just a player, but as the player who is also the wife to the DM.
That's another one
I got quite a bit of grief from these 2 players who accused me of getting preferential treatment, accused me of getting more magical items, which it was strange considering you were actually tougher on me than the other people, and I was the only one who had magical items taken away from them for various like reasons or whatnot for the story. And for balancing, and I had no problem with it because I want to play the story. I am an avid reader, a gamer, so I love the story aspect of things. So I don't care about how many magical items I have or whatever. If it fits, great. If it makes my character awesome in the story, great. But I don't need that to be like, I need a +3 this that does these spells. That's not my thing. So it was really interesting to deal with that at a table. You know, it ended up taking care of itself through the DM, and I had no part in that.
And you even, I mean, I even remember you were kind of on this idea of, oh, you know, they're going to probably blame me.
Yeah,
thinking, they did. Assuming that it was you. Yeah, and I had to stand firm and basically give them, you know, umpteen examples and that it was entirely my decision. Because even I knew that even though that was going on, you were still willing to keep playing with them. It wasn't a big deal.
I was one of the people who was like, okay, we'll wait. Like it sucks, but we'll wait.
Yeah.
And you know, it wasn't even that got them removed. It was the tardiness, the just
the self-centered
lack of attention
again,
at the table.
It
things
was
like
everybody
that.
was playing their game,
Yeah.
and we were riding around it. And unfortunately, because no one wanted to have a dispute, it went on way too long.
And I get it, because it's tough to have confrontations in front of a group of people. It's tough to have confrontations with friends, let alone with strangers that you're coming together for a table.
Just in the beginning,
right? Just to meet and to kind of try out an activity together for the first time. So it's tough to keep that healthy boundary between yourself, your character, and the other players as well, and their characters. But I've always found too a little bit of comfort in knowing that I can, if I do have an issue or something that I feel I can't bring up as myself, I can always do that. I try to do that somehow in game. So if I feel a little left out or something, I can always have my character in game tell the group, be like, hey, party members, I'm feeling a little like you guys don't care about my role in the party.
Yeah.
Where do I go from here? Or should I just go back to my home country?
Yeah, I think
how do we deal with this?
There's examples of that, right? Where I think an iconic is Critical Role with Scanlan's
Oh
outbreak,
yeah, that's true.
right? Where you can take things where if the player now. Most people assume that was more for a story beat, but say if you were upset that your character's storylines are being ignored, you can have those moments. And now it's so ingrained, it's so there, and it's sometimes creating the dispute actually is what settles it.
It might actually bring everything to a head, and then people might actually talk about it, and you realize that it's all a big misunderstanding. Somebody thought you didn't want to be there. I mean,
I know that there's a lot of extroverts out there, but we know that mostly our table is a bunch of introverts, and we tend to be, a little shy on trying to be outspoken about things like that.
We tend to keep to ourselves, and we tend to sort of sweep our own issues under the rug so that we don't bother other people. And that in and of itself can cause issues. So we do kind of have to be aware of that.
Right. And it's tough too, because this is that thing where you have that ability and I don't, right?
Yeah.
As a dungeon master, I could have one of my DM NPCs throw a fit, but the next person's a new person. So if I'm like, oh, don't take from me, and the next guy comes out, they're like, well, that's a new guy. He has all the rules. Whereas a player, you guys have your one character. So once you say, okay, my character does not like this, they know now for the rest of the time that they travel with you to not do that. So it is a really unique way I'm seeing now for players to really kind of handle early disputes.
Without feeling like they, as a person, have to come out and be like, yo, table, I'm not liking this.
I can't do that as a DM because every NPC is a different person.
You would have to stop the game and be like, I need to talk to you guys like a person.
Every NPC would read a Miranda rights card of I am Fred. You are not allowed to steal from me, hurt me in any way, take me, dissuade me, talk me, make fun of my name.
Oh, that just makes it so not fun, right?
Right. And so it really is a unique way, you're saying, for a player to preemptively settle disputes.
Yeah. A DM has a lot of different ways to settle disputes. You can cause things to happen in world that cause consequences, right?
Yeah.
Things like that. But players, we only really have agency over ourselves. And so it's really up to us too, I think, to facilitate a sort of positive gaming experience that extends beyond ourselves. Sure, we're here to enjoy ourselves, but we can't enjoy ourselves unless the whole table's having fun, right? So we got to make sure that we're aware of anything we might be doing that might be causing issues at the table. For me, for example, sometimes I tend to get a little excited and cut people off mid-sentence. And so I have been trying to be like, let people finish first, then you can go and outburst and whatnot.
Right. Yeah. So I think for me, on my final take on all of this, really for DMs, I think the biggest thing for DMs is kind of knowing when to do it yourself and when to put it to a vote.
Yeah.
If you're unsure of yourself in making those decisions, always put it to a vote.
Yeah.
Because then your players decide for you. It's that safety. But never be afraid of sometimes having to make that universal vote
down.
yourself and having to do something. Because sometimes, take it from me, if you wait too long, if you let it go and you allow maybe the vote to be a group vote, the players are going to be nice. The players are going to keep it going.
Yeah.
But in reality, your table's going to suffer. So there are times that you just have to do it, roll the dice, and make the decision. And that's part of that, why not everyone's a DM. It is tough, and it will always be tough. I'll never know exactly when the right time to do those kind of things are.
Right.
But I learn from time and use and experience, just like in the games.
Yeah.
But that's really kind of my last little point. So for you, what would be DM Wife's final take?
I think beyond the being able to use your character as a sort of medium of conversation for yourself, I think, being open and available to go to your DM for support in something that is bothering you is a big deal, especially if it's something that is super important, right? Like if someone is making you uncomfortable at the table with inappropriate comments or inappropriate actions,
it just makes you feel it,
right? You need to go to the DM because they are essentially the rule maker, the rule keeper. And so if you feel uncomfortable, there's a good chance that other people at the table are feeling uncomfortable as well. And the DM could be a good gauge of being able to go to those players privately and ask without making a big deal about it.
There's always steps. And the first step, like you said, is really just getting out there and talking. And I really like that as being really the first and main step you should always take.
Never be afraid to talk to not even just your DM, either fellow players as well, especially if you trust someone, and then they can encourage you to go to your DM. I think that's important. But just, never be afraid to speak out in defense of yourself.
Great advice. Great advice.
And that's a wrap for today's episode on handling table disputes. We hope you found some helpful tips, maybe a few laughs, and that you're feeling ready to tackle any challenges that pop up in your next game.
Absolutely. Remember, everyone, at the end of the day, D&D is about coming together to tell an awesome story. Disagreements happen, but with a little patience, clear communication, and the right approach, you can keep the game moving forward.
Exactly. And if you've got any memorable dispute stories or solutions that worked at your table, we'd love to hear them. Share them on our Discord or shoot us a message on social media.
And don't forget to rate and review us wherever you listen to your podcast. It really helps other players and DMs find the show and keep us going every time.
Thanks for tuning in, adventurers. We'll catch you next time on You Heard It From Us. Until then, keep rolling those dice and telling those stories.
Have a good one.
Thanks for tuning in to You Heard It From Us.
We hope you enjoyed the adventure and picked up a few tips for your own gaming table. But the journey doesn't end here.
We'd love to hear from you. Join our Couple of Nerds Discord community where you can share your thoughts, ask questions, and suggest topics for future episodes. Whether you're a seasoned player or just starting out, there's a spot for everyone at our table.
To keep up with all our latest adventures and episodes, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep the magic alive and connects us with even more amazing listeners like you.
And remember, you can find us on all major podcast platforms. Just search for You Heard It From Us and hit that subscribe button.
We can't wait to see you on Discord and hear your stories. Together, we can make the world of tabletop gaming even more magical.
Until next time, keep rolling those dice.
And may your adventures be legendary.